Welcome back to Technology Behind Business. Outsourcing can be a controversial issue, especially if it means people's jobs are at risk. For business, there can be big savings for those willing to take the plunge. Technologies such as the cloud are making it even more cost-effective to outsource IT functions, for example. So what should be outsourced and what should be kept in-house? Our expert panel on this issue includes Linus Lai from IDC Australia, Dave Stevens from Brennan IT and Donald Graham from Deloitte. Gentlemen, it is great to have you on board the program. Thank you all. Is it true, in summary, that business owners are very keen to outsource, but the function managers or the staff tend to fear that? Donald, I might start with you. What is the business view of outsourcing? It often has a dirty name, doesn't it?
It does. I think that over the last couple of years there's more of a maturity in the Australian market around outsourcing as organisations see the benefit. Notwithstanding that, there's always going to be discomfort at the very least from those individuals that are going to be impacted by outsourcing, but we're certainly seeing a growing acceptance in the Australian market across a wide range of functions, not just technology, but in finance, HR and many other processes. And I think that momentum will continue.
And I'll put this to all of you, has the definition of outsourcing over the last decade changed? It was synonymous with job losses. Do we look now at outsourcing as job opportunities for other smaller niche operators, for example? Linus?
Well, in terms of, you're right, outsourcing is now moving into what we term as outsourcing 2.0. It's been past 10 years already, and the second wave of 10-year contracts are all up for renewal. We saw about 5.3 billion worth of contracts last year. I think a bulk of them were actually renewals from previous older outsourcing contracts in the IT space, right? So the new characteristics of the outsourcing today is not just for cost efficiency, right? It's for business transformation purposes, innovation and IT services delivery, and these are all characteristics of the next generation of outsourcing contracts. I think this is something to look forward to from a skills-based perspective.
Dave, would you agree with that? The definition of outsourcing has changed?
I don't know that the definition of so much has changed, but I think the interpretation of it from the mid-market's perspective definitely has. I think Donald mentioned that there's a lot of trepidation from staff about some outsourcing. And look, what we find in the mid-market is that often there is a little bit of hesitancy around from the staff's perspective. But once the outsource actually occurs, often they're so excited that, thank goodness we don't have to do that anymore. Thank goodness that function now is done by someone who's expert at it. It always works, and we can get on with the job of, improving our competitive advantage or adding value in different ways.
What is driving outsourcing in business now? Is it a desire to cut costs, or is it, as you referred to there, Linus, the possibility of actually getting someone who might be better at that part of your business to do the work?
We find that, there are some cost savings, there's no doubt about it, and you might be thinking about 10 or 20% or some marginal cost savings, but that shouldn't be the primary driver. If all you want is mess for less, in an outsourcing sense, then you've got to question your reasons behind it.
What's driving outsourcing in your view?
Look, I'd agree, cost is always going to be a major factor, but the first thing I'd say is any organisation thinking about it should say, how is outsourcing actually going to help my overall business strategy? How is it actually going to help the organisation be more effective in its markets and with its customers? I think the other thing that's driving it, frankly, we're in an economy where we're basically getting close to full employment. We've got less than 5%. Frankly, I think one of the biggest issues that's driving outsourcing and will continue to drive outsourcing in Australia is the fact that we don't have the people to actually undertake a lot of these jobs, and I can't see that situation changing over the next couple of years.
I'll stay with you, Donald, for a moment. We have seen over the history of the economy that when things tend to improve, often businesses bring functions that have been outsourced back in under the company umbrella. Are we seeing that now that there's evidence the economy is improving?
I'm not seeing that. If anything, I'm continuing to see increased momentum, partly because of the long-term view around where's this business going, partly around skills. But I think it's also driven by the fact that organisations, once they've actually invested in outsourcing. Like any transformational change, it takes time to settle down, 18 months, 2 years. They're actually then looking, well, what else can we do to outsource? I do think longer term, if you look at very large organisations, very often they're comfortable with some a kind of hybrid model. Some activities are outsourced and some are insourced, and they may move that around for various reasons. But overall, we're not seeing any evidence of organisations, because of the economy, bringing stuff back in.
In terms of that, it's not the economy that's bringing things in. I think it's the services maturity. Because what we've seen in the last year itself, in terms of bringing back in, is a lot more control, right, of the functions that to be outsourced. So, in the past, where you wholesale lift and shift the entire IT organization into a service provider organization, I think you can see a lot more organizations today don't want to do that. They want to take back the control of how they go about choosing the subcontractors and the different parts of discrete outsourcing pieces within a master services agreement. Right. That's what's being taken back in terms of control.
The relationship is changing, but many of the functions are remaining outside the core business.
I think the other thing is that organisations' expectations of what they want from outsourcers has changed. So what we're seeing is a renewal, or contracts being up for renewal, and organisations looking at more than just cost. They're looking for innovation, they're looking for new ideas. What else can you do to add value to what I've outsourced to you?
Yeah. Dave, let's talk about IT. Many people who watch this program are heavily involved in IT. What does an IT department look like when it's been outsourced? Many managers are hesitant to lose that control, aren't they?
Absolutely, and look, I think that's up to the company that's doing the outsourcing, but what we generally see, and we're an outsource provider ourselves, is that companies will want to keep IT strategy themselves. If they've got a core business application that they've authored themselves or that really is core to their business, they'll want to keep control of that. What they do tend to want to outsource is things like the management of their hardware and infrastructure platforms, and they might do that to cloud computing, or they might do it on-premise.
The cloud computing, you mentioned it. I want to talk about where the technology is changing that allows the outsource process to be easier. I'll ask you that, Dave, and then come to you, Linus.
So cloud, for example, this is the outsourcing of your hardware and software, of your tin, your infrastructure, and that's a pure outsourcing process. And what that allows is that to your outsourcer, to your cloud provider, we can then layer services on much more cost effectively and add a lot of value up that stack. And what we tell our clients is, if it's core, if it's adding competitive advantage to your business, then you should keep it, insource it. If it's a commodity function and it's just about getting the best outcome at the lowest price, outsource it.
Linus, so where is the technology changing that allows outsourcing to be more effective?
Well, cloud has introduced a very interesting dynamic to outsourcing contracts, because in the past you obviously absorb all the assets of the IT organization. Now with cloud, the IT organization, the end user organization expects that the service provider use private cloud or public cloud infrastructure as part of the service delivery within the outsourcing contracts as well. So it has an opportunity to cannibalize a little bit of the very traditional IT and IS outsourcing infrastructure that has happened in the past. So with that, I think there's a bigger expectation on really for the service provider to start transforming infrastructures into private clouds and then managing those types of infrastructures for these end user organization.
Okay. We're running a little short of time. Donald, I'll come back to you. How does a business know whether it will be cost effective to outsource a function? Where do they start when they begin that homework?
I think they need to look at is this process capable of being fairly standardised? Is it something that's replicable by an outsourcer? They obviously need to look at the costs and benefits, and usually the economics stack up fairly well. But the other thing, I think, is what's the competencies that are going to be moved outside or taken outside? Are they core competencies? If they're not, then it would suggest that there's at least a case to outsource it. But also, I think then there's you have to look at how important that process is, or interdependent with the end user, your end customers, and your strategic competitive advantage. You need to look at all these things rather than just the cost.
Dave, what's the kind of company that could be looking to outsource information technology? And even as a provider, you would know there are some companies who should just keep it in-house.
There are some companies that should, and maybe electronic payment companies, that's core to them. They really should keep control of that software themselves, for example. I think the smaller the company, the more they outsource. So you can have 1 and 2 man companies, and they outsource pretty much everything apart from their core function. In our market, say that 500-seat organisation, a lot of their functions are outsourced in an IT world. Usually, all of the management of hardware and software, whether that's cloud or on-premise, all of the stack right up through the operating system, even through to databases and web servers and all of that sort of thing. Applications often outsourced, I'd say 50-50.
Okay. It's another TBB panel that will give people plenty of food for thought. Linus Lai, Dave Stevens and Donald Graham, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.